Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Warm welcome to another edition of APAC Dialogue. And today we have with us a global personality. He is John DiLullo, the Chief Revenue Officer of Forcepoint. Before we start the interaction with John, perhaps it makes sense for us to tell a little bit about APAC News Network. We are a media organization headquartered out of Noida with a pan-India presence, and our focus is on technology deployment across government, healthcare, education, BFSI, enterprise, startups, and the likes. So without further ado, let us start today's interaction with John DiLullo. Okay, so the way we want to structure it is first we would like to, if you can give an update on the Forcepoint portfolio in terms of the flagship solutions and services.
Okay.
One that. The next would be basically last couple of years during the pandemic, what we have seen is the with and work from anywhere kind of mode, the pattern of workloads in enterprises have changed as well as the security paradigm. So, keeping that in mind, how has the engagement with the enterprises changed during this changing pattern of workloads?
Okay.
Then, would like to focus a little on the managed security model. How then primarily more for the manufacturing organization where they are looking at an IoT kind of deployment. A lot of focus is given on the IT security, but more on the operational technology, the OT security. That's where there's a lot of challenges happening. And also, if you can a little bit elaborate on your plans for the Asia geography, the focus areas, what would be? These are broadly the areas that we are looking at.
Okay.
So maybe the best would be if you can start with the portfolio,
Okay.
the flagship solutions and services that are
Okay.
there.
And just by way of introduction, to my left here is Bjorn Engelhardt, and he is the president of the Asia Pacific operations for all of us. He has all the responsibility from everything from, and we have a broad heritage. We've been in business for more than 20 years. We have a lot of success, almost 13,000 customers on a global basis, and mostly enterprises and government agencies. I would break our solutions down into four critical areas. The first one ties into your second question, which is the deployment of SASE type solutions and cloud-based security. And that's our flagship. You'll see it on our website. Forcepoint 1 is what we refer to it. And it's this notion of a unified security posture that enterprises can embrace in essentially work from anywhere environments. That's our fastest growing product. It's the one we've invested in perhaps the most in the last 2 or 3 years, and that's timely because so many people during the pandemic were working from anywhere. So there's that. We have three other branches of the business. We have a market-leading Magic Quadrant solution in data loss prevention, and that is a product where we essentially keep people from having either intentional or accidental loss of data through different channels, whether that be data in motion or data in rest, and we do that through just about all channels, and I would say that's our second business. Our third business is an SD-WAN, next generation physical edge product that we deploy globally. that has next generation firewall functionality and SD-WAN functionality. That's also a strong growing category for us as more and more people move toward SD-WAN solutions. And then the last one, we have a very mature, big, growing government business, which is focused primarily on critical infrastructure and securing things like pipelines and government institutions, the Intel community, and different branches of Defense Department, those kind of things. So those are the four elements of our business, the four primary ones. You
So
mentioned,
here, before we come
yeah,
to the second question, then one point regarding that, say two of the product lines are DLP and the WAN that you were mentioning. One challenge there often is even when enterprises are deploying that, if I may say, significantly deploying that, there is a challenge in the productivity of the enterprise in some cases gets compromised. It's not um, they are not being able to leverage that optimally.
right.
So how do you sort of look at negating that challenge? And regarding the critical infrastructure for government, again, across geographies, government will be, I think, most regulated sector. So there are multiple compliances and the same solutions as perhaps to conform to those different compliances across different geographies. So how is that managed?
Um, Let me answer your
The productivity one.
yeah, the
first.
productivity one. We don't view our solutions as ones that impair productivity, or certainly not if they're deployed correctly. For instance, I guess you could say, yeah, I want to work at home on a document, and so I want to share it via Dropbox with myself, and yes, people will be upset about that. Sometimes I get an email that I want to cut and paste into a text message, for instance, right? And I can't do that because our system doesn't allow me to do that. So yeah, I mean, employees will complain about that once or twice or here and there, but I don't think it's a
Okay.
big productivity. There's an easy trade-off there, and we make it very easy to dial up or dial down the amount of restrictions that you put in place. More often, the productivity is connected with the security operations center productivity. So if you set your risk profile as very averse, then you're going to generate more alerts, and so your security operations center will have more to deal with, more to investigate, that kind of thing. So, we view generally those technologies as productivity enhancing. Certainly, things like SD-WAN and network security is productivity enhancing. The only example occasionally is you may. I guess that you may want to go to a website that is not within policy or something like that, and that could irritate a customer, but it generally doesn't impair productivity. What it does do, what our solutions do allow you to do, is work from anywhere, day extend, so you can work at different hours from different locations, from an airplane, from all sorts of different places, and so I think generally it's a net productivity benefit, not a tax. Occasionally, why can't I do this? I want to do this. Why can't I do this? I have no malice, but for the most part, these technologies improve productivity.
Okay, and the compliance part of the government, multiple regulations in different geographies.
Yeah, the regulations are different everywhere, but they're generally following data protection. They're generally data protection regulations. They're generally data access regulations, and so we are a huge facilitator there, because we support things like medical. We have almost 3,000 templates, for instance, in our data protection product, where people can protect different types of medically sensitive data. They can protect different types of PII, social, different tax ID numbers, for instance, those kind of things, and those are all essentially out of the box solutions. And so, I think the regulations and the constant review of the regulations, most of them are public, and so they actually help us inform how to build filters, and it's generally good for business. And we have out of the box solutions for many of our customers that help them adhere to those regulations and meet those compliance requirements.
Okay, so we'll come to the next.
Yeah, so managed security model of security. There's a couple of different ways to look at that. So sometimes when people say managed security, they mean essentially cloud-based security, or a security solution that's centralized in one place, and that place is that what you mean by it, or do you mean?
See, I'm saying typically the way enterprises, they will have multi-cloud environment now. There will be public clouds that too from maybe different providers. Then they will have certain applications on private cloud. Some apps might be on the edge. And so in that environment, that multi-cloud environment, the security, that's where the practicality lies in terms of the security challenges there. So how are you managing or helping enterprises manage that?
Yeah, I think that's I mentioned our flagship product is a SASE product. It's a secure edge product. It's moving the administration and the enforcement of policy decisions to the edge. In the old days, policy enforcement was done at the perimeter. The world of SASE, which is new technology, but we're one of the leaders of it, is now moving that enforcement out to the edge, and that makes managed service offers much easier to deploy. In the old days, a managed service offer on the perimeter would be, here's my policy. A managed service provider may help you deploy that on your premise. They may do patch management. They may do periodic updates. They may manage the security operations center. They may do alert investigation and triage and all these types of things. Today that's changing, and it's much easier now to do that, leveraging technologies such as SASE, and that's the direction that we're moving in. So we keep our policy in one centralized place. We establish someone's identity, and then we enforce those policies wherever they may enter, or wherever they interact with, I should say, the application. So if that's at a desktop, we enforce it at the desktop. If that's at a hyperscaler, we enforce it at the edge of the hyperscaler. So that's the plan. That's where everyone is going. So.
And you also mentioned earlier about that work from anywhere, and especially if we look back at the last couple of years, predominantly due to the pandemic, what happened was more this work from anywhere culture. So what has been your experience regarding in terms of the dynamics of security itself changed?
Yeah,
a lot of heterogeneous systems came into the people who were working from anywhere.
Yeah, I think people took two approaches. One was they hairpinned all their traffic back through their enterprise with VPN and VPN concentrators, and they essentially put people, at least logically, back on the network. Or they started to deploy SASE-like solutions. Yes. And the ones that are doing the best and are the most secure today, I believe, are the latter, the group that began deploying SASE type solutions.
And so how was the transition? What were your experience with your enterprise customers?
I'll let Bjorn talk to that on the Asia, from an Asia perspective. But I think, customers are going at different speeds, of course. Customers that are in highly regulated industries are maybe perhaps going a little slower than others, because in some cases the regulations haven't caught up to the new topographies. More progressive companies are moving very quickly. And I think, in Asia, we have the other challenge that clouds are not necessarily as available on a country by country basis as they maybe in other parts of the world. Bjorn, I don't know if you have anything you want to add there.
No, I think we've seen the first few years, the first 2 years of the pandemic was focused on let's just triage access to applications and people. What we're seeing now in the last 6 months has been an acceleration of okay, we need to pivot the way we run our business towards a cloud first. I've seen everyone put together with sticky tape and string, a solution to get them working, and then realised that probably created more security issues for them than it solved in a way, but that had to be done. What we're now seeing is that the SASE momentum is building, and particularly cloud adoption is accelerating. I've been here in India meeting with both government and some commercial customers, and I think what happened with COVID, it just accelerated the saying cloud is the way to go there, and then this new paradigm of SASE or Forcepoint 1 is taking off.
So how does that translate into, if we talk about the business aspect of that, especially the way it happened in the last couple of years? So there were two challenges. Say, pre-pandemic, there were these most of these enterprise customers, and there were certain, if I may say, the SLAs with them. There were certain service level agreements with them, and now suddenly their working mode also shifted. So many of those, the way those SLAs were defined also had to be changed, had to be changed dynamically. So how was that impact on the business? And second was from a Forcepoint perspective, what was your focus, especially if we see the last couple of years? Was it more in terms of retaining the existing customers by deepening the engagement with them, or looking at more greenfield customers? So how did you balance between the two?
Well, that's really interesting. Interesting way to put it on the second question. Can I ask you just to clarify the SLA part of the first question?
So SLA part was, what I meant was, pre-pandemic, there were certain set of SLAs. Now suddenly, and they were defined depending on the condition, the way enterprises were working at that time.
Okay.
That working, the paradigm completely got shifted, while the SLAs remained the same. So how did that, and it had to be changed or managed dynamically at that time. After maybe 1 or 2 months, every business had to function.
Yeah, of
Whatever.
course,
So how was that SLA change managed? And more from a Forcepoint perspective, acquisition of new customers vis-a-vis retention
Yeah.
of the existing, how was the balance?
I guess I'll answer the second one first. I mean, we see, I think we have some advantage in that we don't have, from a SASE perspective, we don't have a particularly gigantic traditional security install base. So, for instance, next generation firewall, some of the bigger players, the usual suspects, you could name them. They have to keep a large install base of those traditional systems and innovate. So we've seen record numbers of new customers in the last 24 months, and that's been a very vibrant part of our business. I think that's because we don't have that schizophrenic requirement to tell them that the old stuff is good and the new stuff is also good. And we just say, go right to the new stuff. And so we've seen, like I say, we've added, it's been a dramatic addition of new logos in the last 2 years. The SLA portion of the question, I don't know how to exactly relate to that, because the people that had deployed cloud-based security prior to the pandemic, I believe, found that it was easy to expand and to scale those up and to maintain the same level of SLA. The people that had not made those moves had very quickly to scramble and acquire more hardware and deploy more on-premises applications and get more bandwidth. And uh, I I think they did that with as much speed as they could, but it was a well-known solution. So they knew, okay, we had 50% of our workforce working from home before. Now we have 100% of our workforce. They knew very quickly what they had to do, and so I think they did it. And as you said, after 6 months or so, very few people in knowledge work went out of business during the pandemic. They managed. And so I think it was easy for okay, he's giving me the 5-minute warning. I think it was easy for the people that were in a cloud environment that auto scaled, and more difficult for people that had to expand an existing system. But again, they knew what they had to do.
Okay. Another area I'd like to understand is, again, from Forcepoint perspective, any specific go-to-market strategy or initiative that you follow, and will that be applicable across geographies, specifically within Asia or India, maybe?
Yeah.
And are there specific verticals, like earlier government you mentioned, other than government specific verticals where you focus on, or is it vertical agnostic?
I'm going to let Bjorn answer the go-to-market. I'll answer very quickly the verticals.
Sure.
The verticals that we're having the most luck in are the ones where they're distributed, either distributed deployment or high sensitivity to data loss. Those are the areas we do really well. And so people that have 1,500 sites and require something that's cloud-based, that's lightweight, that fits the SASE model very well. That's a great area for us right now. And then our leadership in data loss prevention makes anybody that has a requirement, medical information, sensitive banking information, PII, those areas. That's been another vertical that's been very strong. Pharma, with everybody working on immunotherapies and something, that became a very big vertical for us. So those verticals have been particularly active. As far as go-to-market, Bjorn, I don't know how you would comment on that.
Just back to your previous question about the split between existing and new customers. There in India, it was almost 50% of our business was net new customers. And if you bear in mind that we've had a very strong operation here in India for 15 plus years, it's quite a significant growth of new customer acquisitions. Particularly driven around by some of the events that John talked about, being work from home. I need to protect my information, and so there were a lot of companies reinvesting in data protection, in particular during the last 2 years. Our go-to-market, and it is the usual segments and verticals that we apply. We're very strong here in India in the BFSI markets. Government is another very strong market, and it was originally more around traditional web protection, but what we've seen in the last, 2 years is an acceleration of data protection in the government markets here in India. Our go-to-market is bifurcated on high touch for the larger enterprises. We have a very active channel community and partner community. We recently relaunched a pretty generous new partner program aimed at incentivizing the partner community to be more focused on driving net new customer acquisition. So we do a lot of that new acquisition and mid-market through our partner community, and we have a good-sized, high-touch enterprise account team there as well.
So, I'm not asking exactly, but how big would be the large enterprise where it's the direct?
You mean in terms
the direct account?
We don't
Proportion.
we sell everything through our partner community. We influence direct because there's much more than just buying a product. Our partners take an active role in not just implementing our products, but managing a lot of the security elements of the data protection, the operationalization of it. We're probably a 50-50 in our enterprise business, large enterprise, including government, and the other 50% is more commercial. I think, as we'll see with Forcepoint 1, the ability to consume that is much easier than a lot of the traditional legacy solutions where you had to implement on site. And I think as we work with service providers, we have a partnership with Airtel, who I was just visiting just before, a go-to-market partnership with Airtel, where they will help us distribute that in a managed manner out to their customer base as well.
Okay. And so the last I would like to conclude with is what are going to be the focus areas, and focus I mean in terms of it can be product or solution, new products or solution, geographical expansion, or other strategic initiatives.
Yeah, we have. I mentioned we have 4 businesses that are doing very well. Government solutions. There have been so many. Well, there was an airline breach that happened just this week here in India, but there's so many regulated industries where we believe critical infrastructure solutions will continue to be important. Data loss prevention will continue to be important, especially with new regulations coming out daily and fines and public shaming of customers and companies that don't meet those objectives. SD-WAN also continues to be a major driver for us, especially where people want to do dynamic routing based on security profile instead of necessarily cost. People used to route traffic based on cost, not on the risk. So risk-based routing is a risk-based management and handling of network traffic. It's a very interesting growing market for us. But the big one is the deployment of SASE solutions. That is a multi-billion-dollar market that is perhaps less than 10% penetrated, and one where 80% of all enterprises will ultimately end up deploying SASE-based technologies. And so that is land grab right now, and there's a lot of motion, a lot of energy, a lot of momentum in the business, and so we're leaning in on that. We're investing heavily. Go to our website, you can see we have all types of promotional materials in that area. We're acquiring customers very rapidly in India and other places in Asia and across the world in that space. So that's a big focus.
But how would you differentiate Forcepoint there? As you mentioned earlier, some of the product lines, there are already the existing players who have significant market shares also. So especially vis-a-vis those sort of competition, what would you rate are the key differentiators for Forcepoint?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, we're not a Me Too player, so there are perhaps the number one thing that we do differently with our SASE solutions is leverage those other areas that I mentioned. So we deploy SASE solutions, but we understand how to deploy them into critical infrastructure projects. We deploy SASE solutions, but we understand how those work hand in hand with data loss prevention requirements that a customer may have, or sensitive regulatory or punitive risks that they have. So I think the notion of the platform of not only being able to deploy a SASE solution, but that not being a very myopic solution, but rather one that really delivers enterprise value. The only way you can do that is if you've been in business for 25 years like we have, and if you have thousands and thousands of customers in the region and globally that have these other requirements. Those other requirements don't go away. It's just new requirements that people need to operate in this completely virtualized and work from anywhere environment. But so that's I would say the number one differentiator for us.
And any other differentiator that you would like to mention?
Well, we're very nice people. No, I would say our heritage is we came out of the as you know, we were spun out of Raytheon, which was a government defense contractor. So we understand government, we understand defense, we understand all the process and the requirements and the nuance of that business. That together with the breadth of our portfolio and the companies that we've acquired. We acquired 3 companies this past year and have incorporated all those technologies into our solution.
If I could add one thing from an Indian perspective, what we hear from a lot of it, typically the investment goes first into the US, Europe, and then Asia Pacific.
Exactly.
The fact that we're sitting on top of an AWS platform Instead of building and managing our own infrastructure, it gives us the opportunity to leverage both the scale and the locations of where Amazon sits out there. And that is the feedback I've had from every customer, is as soon as you talk about the way that we're leveraging hyperscale platforms, they go, oh, that's brilliant. Because normally India and everywhere else gets left behind, right? And in this case, we're leapfrogging the competition. They're still managing their own environments and having to go through upgrade cycles, hope they can get the right equipment, etc. So down on the ground in India, that is a big differentiator for us.
That's a good point.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All
Thank
right,
you.
Thank you.